CS1113 Intro to Java, Lab 11.
This lab will walk you through the steps needed to make a simple GUI application. Since the code is too large to write in a 2-hour session, you will simply be piecing it together in stages using code that we have already written. The order in which we will build the application is as follows. First, we will get the GUI window up and running. Then we will add a menu bar. Next, we will create the layout and GUI components for the main screen. Then we will add listeners to respond to user events. And finally, we will finish the program logic. Step 1. Getting a GUI window up and running. In Java Swing, a displayable window can be created by extending the JFrame class. In code, this declaration would look something like what is shown here. Suppose that you wanted to create a GUI application called thrust_r that extended JFrame. How would you declare the thrust_r class? You would declare the thrust_r class and declare that it extends JFrame. We also make a main method which creates an instance of our class which will serve as the window for our application. We declare a reaction timer called RT. New instantiates the reaction timer, and we pass in the label for the window as a parameter. Once this is done, you will have an empty shell of an application from which to add more functionality. Step 2. Adding a menu bar. In Swing, a menu bar can be created by attaching a JMenu bar to the frame. The class JMenu forms a menu that can be attached to the menu bar, and JMenuItem forms a menu item that can be attached to a menu. What are the 3 classes needed to create a menu bar with menus and menu items in Swing? JMenuBar, JMenu, and JMenuItem. Step 3. Setting the main GUI layout and adding GUI components. GUI components such as buttons and labels can be added to your application by attaching them to the content pane of the frame. Several components that we will use in this application are JButton, which makes a button you can click on with the mouse, JLabel, which draws a label, and JPanel, a component that other components can attach to. In Swing, the layout of a content pane or a JPanel is controlled by a layout manager. This is a class which does the work of resizing components when the panel resizes. To set the layout of a JPanel called MyPanel, you might use the line of code shown here. The border layout class uses position constants to determine where to put things. We can add a button called North Button to the north position of MyPanel with the code shown here. What code would you use to add a button called Center Button to the center position of MyPanel? You would add the center button to the panel and the location borderlayout.center. Step 4. Adding listeners. In order to make the program do something in response to button presses and other GUI events, we have to listen for and respond to those events. Java Swing allows you to do this by registering classes as listeners to objects that can generate events, such as buttons and menu items. In order to listen to an event, a class must implement a particular listener interface. We can make the reaction timer frame itself implement the listeners by first changing the declaration to be the following. As before, reaction timer extends JFrame, but now it also implements action listener. How would you change the declaration to implement both action listener and mouse listener? Here we simply add mouse listener on the end of the listeners that are implemented. The action listener interface has one method, namely action performed, that must be implemented. It has the prototype shown here. Action performed, which takes an action event and returns void. Step 5, finishing the program. At this point, the GUI part of the program is done and we need to finish the program logic so that it actually does what it's supposed to. In the case of reaction timer, we also add a Java swing timer that will generate new events multiple times per second.